Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. I think we'll go ahead and get started in the interest of time. And if other folks trickle in, that'll be great. My name is Kate Featherston. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm an assistant director of admissions here at Dartmouth, and I want to welcome you to tonight's Rural Student Experiences panel. We've got a great panel of students here to share their experiences with you as students who are from rural areas. And if any questions come up tonight's or during tonight's session rather, please feel free to put those in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to as many of those as we can, in addition to some prepared questions that we had, the ones that folks sent ahead of time. My colleague Jenny Gargano is also in the Q&A box, and she'll be monitoring questions as they come in as well. We also have live transcription available for tonight, so if you want to use that, you can go ahead and use that option at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And with that, I think we'll go ahead to start introducing our esteemed panelists. And I'll have each of you say maybe your name, your pronouns, your hometown, major, and then let's do something you're interested in on campus, whether that's a club or something that you're involved in academically. So we'll go ahead and I'll stop my share. And let's start with Jack, and then we'll popcorn around.
Yeah, hi there. I'm Jack. I use he, him pronouns. I'm originally from Fredonia, Kentucky. I am a double major in environmental studies and anthropology. And something I'm involved with on campus is I'm one of the captains of the Dartmouth Timber team.
Great, thank you. And then the next on my screen is Abby, if you want to go next.
Hi, I'm Abby. I use she, hers pronouns, and I'm from North Augusta, South Carolina. I'm studying English and government, and on campus, I play club water polo.
Thanks. And Juan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Juan. I use he, el pronoun. I'm from Coldwater, Mississippi, where I'm currently at right now. At Dartmouth, I'm a geography major with a minor in education, and on campus, I'm involved in immigration advocacy as the co-director for the Coalition for Immigration Reform and Equity at Dartmouth.
Thanks, Juan. And Savannah, last but not least.
Sure. Hi, I'm Savannah. I'm from Windsor, Virginia. I use she, her pronouns. I am a theater major and an English and Russian double minor coming on my last term here at Dartmouth, which is sad, but and on campus, I am involved with inclusivity, especially within my Greek organization.
Great, thank you all. So if that brought up some areas of the college that you'd like to talk about, please answer or ask those questions in the Q&A box. We'd love to talk a little bit more about what folks do on campus. But we'll start with some just prepared questions and then go into those questions that folks in the audience have. So the first one I have for you all, maybe we'll pin that over to Juan to start with. Dartmouth is in a rural location, right? But most students who attend Dartmouth are not from rural locations. We looked it up earlier. It's around 13% of students at Dartmouth come from rural areas. How is Dartmouth different and similar to where you're from?
Yeah, so one similarity I would say is definitely the color green. Growing up, accidentally, ironically, my favorite color is just green. I was always like the third Power Ranger, so he always happened to be green, always fit in. And just looking outside my window right now, just the trees and the grass and a beautiful spring day here in Mississippi, which I know many in Hanover are envious of right now because it's kind of chilly up there. But I really enjoyed it. And I would like to say that although I do live in a rural area and I do have a lot of privilege right now to be able to be outside and to enjoy it maskless, I was not the most like crunchy, as we say at Dartmouth, like terminology. Most ruralness enjoys the outdoors, especially right now. I find myself sometimes more locked inside, but I really appreciate that there's more opportunities at Dartmouth for me to do that, especially now as we've seen with the pandemic. You can go for walks, you can enjoy an array of activities outside for free. I went sledding for the first time. And then my first year at Dartmouth, I went ice skating as well. So even if you're a student who comes from a rural area and isn't particularly into the ruralness of it all, at least you have that opportunity to be able to concentrate on your studies and meditate. If you need to get away, go for a walk and have the opportunities of the outdoors, which I think a lot of students are envious of right now.
Definitely. Does anyone else have a similar experience, a different experience? Does Dartmouth feel different from home? Maybe Savannah, do you have something to say to that?
Sure. So my particular hometown, Windsor, is not a very walkable town. Everything is very spread out. Something that I've appreciated that's slightly different here at Dartmouth is like, yes, it is definitely a rural area, but it's also a pretty walkable area, especially like around campus and within the downtown area and certain areas of the Upper Valley as well. So that's been really nice for me. I also have gotten to pick up like roller skating since I've been at Dartmouth, and there's some really great hills around here that my hometown's pretty flat. So I can catch some really great wind going down some hills in my skates. So that's been something that's been new for me in a good way.
Great, thanks. And kind of going off of that question, what was the transition to Dartmouth like? Maybe we'll start with Jack. And what kind of resources did you use on campus to ease that transition?
Right. So I went to a very, very small public school for high school. So I was in the elementary, middle, and high schools that I went to were all in the same parking lot. So I had the same 50 people in my high school or my class that I had from kindergarten all the way to senior year of high school. So the transition from knowing those same 50 people for 13 years to even a school that's, actually small like Dartmouth was a huge change for me. So instead of 50, we have about 1,300 per class. And that was just wildly different to me. Although at least at Dartmouth, you can walk around campus, normally during COVID, this is all excluding COVID, you can walk around campus and always see somebody who you recognize their face. That was something that really made me feel more at home, I suppose, because, at my home school, I knew every single person and their family almost. That's just kind of the way it works. But at Dartmouth, while you're not that close with every single person around you, you will know faces of somebody wherever you are on campus. Whether you enjoy that or not, it's a completely different story. But it was definitely something that made me feel more at home on campus, just myself, because that's something more that I'm used to.
Great, thanks. And Abby, can you share a little bit more, if you remember back to your first year here, what it was like to come to Hanover for the first time, and how that transition went for you?
Yeah, so like Jack, is also a much bigger environment, many more people to be around, so I was a little intimidated at first. But I think similarly, like I made connections with like friends, and then also something that was really important to me was like we have professors who are like our house professors who I met with before classes even started freshman year. So that was really useful for me because I was not used to it all like having office hours and like big classes with professors who had PhDs. That was very intimidating to me. So having that professor connection, and she kind of helped me figure out like, what do you even do in office hours? How to make appointments with professors. That was super helpful.
Yeah, so kind of that like hidden curriculum, things that you don't really know about in high school that become very clear your first couple weeks of college. I'm curious, Abby, if you could maybe elaborate on how academically prepared you felt coming into Dartmouth. Was it a hard transition, or was it one that was easier because of high school?
Yeah, I think it was time management wise. I think high school prepared me well because I did a lot outside of the classroom. And so I think like having those time management skills from like doing so many extracurriculars at Dartmouth, I wasn't able to like balance as many extracurriculars with the academic like rigor. So I think having those time management skills from high school really helped me, even if I didn't feel like as academically prepared as some of my peers sometimes.
Yeah, time management is huge at Dartmouth with the quarter system. Did any of you have a quarter system in high school? Probably not, right? That was a new thing. I'm curious, one, how academically prepared did you feel? And were there any resources that you used on campus to kind of help ease your transition?
Yeah, thank you for relaying that question on to me. I'm actually a first generation low income student. There's this great program called FISA that's a intro program to orientation, so pre-orientation program to orientation. And it's for students who identify as first generation and or low income. There's roughly about 17% of us on that. Don't quote me exactly. A lot of us tend to be, a lot of us tend to be students from rural areas as well. So that was a place where I found just a lot of community really coming on as well. And for me, even though Mississippi, we do have a period of time where the climate here gets cold, and I found that it was a lot, maybe a little more hectic at Dartmouth. I definitely had to figure out how to wear more layers and how to stay warmer for longer periods of time. But I was really fortunate that FICEP was there to help me and assist me. So if you're a student who's coming from first gen background, just know that that's a resource on campus. In terms of how it felt academically, I did go to a Title I school. So a lot of us were low income students, public school from the South, just to put it into perspective. So I didn't feel like I was totally prepared to come to Dartmouth, but just as you all are here listening to us, they saw something in me, and I definitely had the intellectual curiosity. And I'm happy to say I'm doing very well. It was an adjustment, but a great one. There's a lot of resources to help you along your way.
And I'm wondering, maybe Jenny, if you could put a link to FICEP in the chat so folks can look that up later if they haven't heard of it. And we got a question that just came in that is a great segue. None of you are from the Northeast. What about the weather? I'm scared of snow, this person is saying. Does anyone want to take on that fear?
I can take it on because, like, one, I'm also from this. Actually, all of us from the South. Okay, so I never experienced more than like 3 inches of snow at one point before coming up here, and I'll be honest, the tail end of freshman fall, it was a little bit of a shock. I looked out my window one day and it was just completely covered, like blanket of snow. I was a little scared, I'll be honest. But what I will say is I was able to talk to some of the like upperclassmen in the community and kind of figure out, like some like winter hack tips at Dartmouth, like what kind of boots that you should probably get, what kind of coats are best for this kind of weather. Something I do want to highlight is I'm also a low-income student, and we have a great program here called the Office of Pluralism and Leadership, or OPL, that'll actually help students find coats and boots and those colder weather items at a lower price, either thrifted or donated, that kind of thing. So there are resources here to adapt to the cold. I was definitely daunted, but now, like I said, I roller skate, but I also love ice skating. And they actually had an ice skate on the green for my senior winter. And I got to do that with my friends. And it's such a great time. And they also have a ski lift that will take Dartmouth students to the ski lift. You can take lessons for a discounted price as a student. And so there's different ways to take advantage of the colder weather. And do I think I'm going to stay in the Northeast after Dartmouth? I'm not entirely sure. I have always been more of a beach kind of person. But it's been a fun 4 years and I don't regret it at all. So.
Yeah. Anyone else have advice coming from a warmer climate to adjust to Dartmouth?
If I had to give one hint of advice to people who are coming to the Northeast for the first time, it's to find something you enjoy doing outside, because being inside all winter long tends to be, it sounds good because it's warm, it's nice, you don't have to like have anything to do with the cold, but that gets a little overwhelming sometimes. I'd never skied before, I never ice skated before, I'd never done anything really with the cold, because like Savannah, and I'm sure the other 2 panelists here, I'd only seen about 2 inches of snow at a time. But I learned how to cross country ski, and this was my free trip that went out through the Dartmouth Outdoor Club I signed up for, and I got taught how to cross country ski, and it's very hard and very, physically demanding, but it's an incredible, workout and something very fun to do to get you outside and actually to interact with the New England winter, which I think is something you should do if you're going to be here in New England during the winter, to kind of learn how to interact with it as well, because that'll make it a whole lot easier for you to make it through.
Great, thank you. And you mentioned the outing club, and you all have mentioned some different clubs and organizations you're involved with on campus. We have a question that just came in. How did you find community on campus when you first came here? This person says they're nervous about making friends at Dartmouth. Does anyone want to take that on? Maybe think back to your first year, your fall here, what that was like and how you went about forming community connections.
Yeah, I can kind of speak to that. So I think from a social aspect, my first year hall was a super important part of my freshman fall and first freshman year. just I think part of it is the cold weather. Sometimes we would all just join in like the community rooms and like not really want to go out. And so that would be a super great place to bond and like get together. And also I think there's just really like spirit and like culture of having doors open, and especially for like the first few weeks of freshman year, people are just super like welcoming and open to meeting new people. It kind of seems sometimes like there's like people who come in knowing a bunch of other freshmen, but I found that that wasn't as intimidating as it seemed. People were super welcoming. And then also getting involved with clubs. There's clubs that are equally as welcoming. There's a ton of club fairs, and I joined a bunch of clubs, but some of which I ended up deciding like weren't for me. But the groups that I did stick with were super welcoming, and also like helped connect me with upperclassmen, which was super important.
And I know, Savannah, you mentioned Greek life and your involvement there. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like on campus? Can first years get involved, for example, and in how that community looks on campus?
Sure. So like I said, I came from the South, so I was honestly very scared of Greek life before coming to Dartmouth. What I found it's much more inclusive than I thought it was going to be when I came here. And what I mean when I say that is, so first years are not allowed to rush. You're not allowed to rush until your second year or go through the recruitment process. And you're actually not supposed to enter a Greek space for the first 6 weeks that you are on campus. And that's just so first years can get acclimated to the new environment, can maybe find some social scenes outside of Greek life before deciding if Greek life and entering those spaces is for them. So my sophomore year, I really wanted just a community of women on campus. I felt like I was looking at all my social like clubs and organizations, and I thought that that was really missing for me. And I also felt like I was missing like a purely like just to get to know people organization. I felt like I was doing a lot of things to like produce work and that kind of thing. And so I went through the recruitment process, and I can honestly say that I've really, really enjoyed it. I mentioned before that I was ended just this past winter, the inclusivity chair for my Greek organization. So what I was able to do is actually like initiate different financial aid programs in my organization and make my space more inclusive for people like me who come from low income backgrounds. And that's been something that was really cool for me, because I had a very kind of idea of Greek life coming into Dartmouth, that it was going to be this space that was all encompassing and you couldn't do any other things if you were involved in Greek life. And it wasn't meant for someone who was like me, who I am a part of the LGBT community and I'm low income. And those are identities that are very important to me, especially at a place like Dartmouth, where I want to be more open about those identities, so people can see that they're here. And so finding that community was a very, very welcome surprise for me. And I think that a lot of other students would agree with me. I'm not going to say that's a universal experience, but 60% of eligible students on campus are affiliated in Greek life, and that makes it about 50% of the student body as a whole. So it is definitely a big presence on campus. That being said, I live in an apartment with 3 of my best friends. 2 of them are unaffiliated, and me and another one are affiliated. So it's definitely not a big divide on campus, at least not in my experience.
Great, thank you. And you talked a little bit about housing and where you're currently living. I'm curious if someone could define what an LLC is for folks that are on the call. This is a type of housing that you can have. Maybe Jack, do you think you can do it?
I think so. So the LLCs are living learning communities. These are specific housing you can apply to live in based around a certain aspect of either community or academics or something along those lines. So for my sophomore fall, I applied to live in the German speaking LLC. I had never actually taken a German class before, but several of my friends had taken German classes and I was interested, and I ended up taking a couple German classes as well after I had lived in the German LLC. And along with living in one of these LLCs, they'll bring different speakers to different places in the LLCs. Besides just language LLCs, there are, I'm gonna miss several, but just like kind of give a brief overview here. I know there are like World Community LLCs, there's a Sustainable Living Center. which is one of my favorites. I've had several friends that lived in the Sustainable Living Center, and I really love that house just in general. So yeah, LLCs are just a somewhat different way of living, other kind of centered around a specific either academic or community-based event, I suppose, rather than just living in a regular dorm room with other college students, which is what you'll be doing, most of you, your freshman year. Either way, you can apply to live in an LLC your freshman year as well, but you will get some kind of regular first year, freshman year housing experience as well.
Great, thank you. And Abby, can you talk, you said that your first year floor was really important in finding community on campus. Can you tell us a little bit more about what housing looks like when you get to Hanover?
Yeah, so we have houses, which are kind of big, overarching community spaces, and you stick with the same house for all 4 years of your Dartmouth experience, and each one has kind of like a centralized study space and a house professor, like I talked about earlier. And I think it's really important just because like, the D plan and even now with COVID, things are just kind of so up in the air sometimes, and that it's really important to have like a consistent group that you move through Dartmouth with. So I happen to be in like the smallest house on campus, which I found was really special because we all got super close. Like we were all just in one dorm building, which usually I think they're spread out over a few. And so I'm really looking forward to getting back with that group when I'm back in on-campus housing.
Great, thank you. So we have some questions that kind of segue us into an academic discussion. Someone wants to know, is there a friendly nature on campus similar to what you might find in the Midwest or the South? Is it collaborative or competitive? What are the academics like? And what are the social spaces like as well? Maybe Juan, do you want to take that on? You could answer either academic or social or both, whatever you feel like.
Yeah, I can touch on the academic. I found it to be really inclusive and then like really collaborative space. That was actually one of the reasons why I chose Dartmouth. Seeing everyone playing on the green with frisbees and outside on a spring day when I visit Dimensions really broke that glass of the perception that I thought of what the Ivy League was, and this really like elitist form of institution of what I thought that was just like so hardcore because everyone was just outside, studying or not studying. And for me, that really made me realize that Dartmouth students prioritize a lot of different things throughout their experience. So academics doesn't necessarily have to be like at the forefront. Some students on campus are just like super active and socially driven. Other students are more possibly involved in other things inside or outside of Dartmouth. So that really helped me realize what my holding was going to be and really helped me find more of my purpose. And so aligned with my passions at Dartmouth as well, which is really a breath of fresh air, especially during times right now with COVID, where it is harder to find those study groups. I would say because of Zoom fatigue, sometimes you don't want to spend all the time on the screen. But I have found that students are more collaborative. Also socially, I would say like I'm not affiliated and I don't feel like that has affected my social life at all. I have found a lot of my community through activists and organizers at Dartmouth. First year trips is also a great experience where I got to meet a lot of different folks, and then through pre-orientation and orientation as well, I think were great places for me. And then through my first job as an eco rep, that Jack was also one of them, I got to meet an also group of first years as well. So just a lot of different spaces to meet a lot of different people. So if you do want to do something socially, there's
Great, thanks. And beyond this sort of collaborative nature that you find in a lot of classes, I think another big hallmark of the Dartmouth academic experience is the D plan or the Dartmouth plan. Does someone want to talk us through what that looks like and how you go about kind of navigating your own D plan? Maybe Abby, do you want to tell us what that is, and then tell us a little bit about what your D plan looks like?
Yeah, so the D plan is kind of built around the quarter system, but even still, it's a little bit different. So the idea is that you have 12 on terms like throughout your whole time at Dartmouth, and then you'll take 4 off terms. Everyone make sure that I'm doing this math right. You'd get 4 off terms during your time. And outside of your freshman year and your senior year, which are more structured to kind of help you build community, and then sophomore summer, which is kind of the same idea, like to build community within your class. So outside of those few specified terms, you have pretty much complete flexibility with when you want to be on taking classes and when you'd rather be off, maybe doing an internship or just taking like personal time to recoup from academic term. So I think that's been super helpful, especially with me through COVID. I've chosen to take my classes pretty much straight through. And that's really helped me because I think it's helping me plan ahead. Like I'd rather do in-person internships. So like taking classes now online has kind of given me 2 terms later where I'll be able to hopefully take advantage of some in-person opportunities.
Great, thank you. And Savannah, do you want to tell us a little bit about how the D plan has impacted your time at Dartmouth?
Sure. So I actually was able to take off my junior fall and complete an internship with the Smithsonian. They have a program there called the Discovery Theater, which actually goes into Washington, D.C. and kind of the DMV area schools and brings theater to young kids to encourage like literacy and numeracy and also just the development of social skills. And it works especially with Title I schools. And so I was able to spend 3 months there just working and writing and getting real theater experience, which has been super valuable to my major, super valuable to my career path. It actually influenced what I'm doing after graduation. It inspired me to apply for Teach for America, which is a 2-year placement program in Title I schools. So I know that I'll be in Charlotte next year for the next 2 years teaching English there, which is really cool. And the D plan is part of what helped me kind of realize that I actually have like a passion for education as well as theater and the arts, which is originally how I found myself in DC. But I was supposed to study abroad this past summer with the theater department. Unfortunately, COVID happened. But that being said, there are so many great study abroads, and I have so many friends who have studied abroad at least once. My next door neighbor, Maria, has studied abroad twice, once in France and once in Scotland. So it's so possible. And also, I just want to say, like, as a low-income student, part of what drew me to Dartmouth was the fact that if you study abroad, your aid will travel with you. So it's not like those experiences are for only a certain part of the Dartmouth population. And the D plan gives you flexibility with that. So like I said, I was going to do it in the summer. So I had actually taken my junior spring off too, which was interesting, getting a little break as soon as COVID hit. But it's a great flexibility, and I personally have really appreciated it.
Great, thank you. So you talked a little bit about study abroad as well, and there's some questions about that in the chat. Has anyone else studied abroad? And if so, if you want to give us a little peek as to what that's like, I got some head shakes. Jack or Juan?
I can speak on study abroad a little bit. I actually had 2 study abroad experiences that were canceled due to COVID, which is very sad. But the way the study abroad works at Dartmouth is each study abroad program, for the most part, is based along a department. So each department has its own study abroad opportunity. And so you will go wherever that location is with a Dartmouth professor and like a cohort of your students, the Dartmouth students as well. And you will be taking classes from your Dartmouth professor and possibly other professors, depending on where you are in the world, for the 10-week period for a single term. So like Savannah said, that kind of gives you flexibility because each term is only 10 weeks long and you have 3 in a year instead of 2 semesters like most colleges. So like I said, I was going to be, before COVID, pre-COVID, of course, I was going to be in South Africa with the environmental studies program last fall. And then I was going to be in New Zealand with the anthropology program this past winter. But again, like that's something that is pretty common for most students here to study abroad once, twice. I have a friend that was studied abroad twice and then was going to study abroad a 3rd time. And again, your aide will go with you on these study abroad like ventures as well. That's just a massive thing for low-income students, especially rural students as well, that are mostly low income, like myself as well. Yeah, so the quarter system definitely provides those opportunities for study abroad opportunities a lot more than like a normal semester system would, at least in my opinion.
Great. And folks have also mentioned some internships they were able to do because of the D plan. I'm curious, Abby or Juan, do you want to talk about an internship or a research opportunity that you were able to do because of the D plan? Whoever would like to go first.
Yeah, so I'm a sophomore, so I've still been taking classes for most of my time, but I do have some exciting things planned with far as sustainable investing goes. I'm super excited to do work right now. The plan is to still be doing that remotely for my junior spring, sorry, or junior fall. So that's the plan right now. But like I said, I think the D plan has offered me a lot of flexibility as far as planning. Like for example, I could take both my junior fall and junior winter off like back to back to try to fit in a longer internship if that's something that like I found something that I was super interested in, or having like those two separate, I could separate those blocks and then take like two different opportunities to try to get different opportunities. So that's something that's really useful with the D plan.
Great. And how about you, Juan?
I found the D plan to be super flexible, and I actually didn't even realize just how amazing it was until I needed that really long break after my first term at Dartmouth, and I realized that we get a really nice long break. So that was super great. And then after I got to know it a little bit better and get more used to it, it really is so incredible in terms of like opportunities and internships, as people have mentioned with study abroad. Like you can do so many of them, as many as you can fit in, I think. And because it's a term system, it really does allow you more flexibility and also more opportunities. In terms of internships, my first summer, I actually interned in DC as well for a White House initiative. So I did that. I was more interested in education policy and work on a federal level. So I was able to explore that. And then my junior fall, I decided that 2 terms remote were a little too much for me and my fatigued eyes. So I actually interned for a local nonprofit here in Mississippi, the Immigration Alliance for Justice and Equity. So I was able to do that remotely here and get funding by the Dartmouth Social Impact Center. And also my first year, I got funding through the Rockefeller Center. So that's another thing that you're worried about, funding and how will you fund those, especially for me, and going into like cities or different places, there's always funding there. And this summer, I'm looking forward to being to be housed a little close to New York and New Jersey and interning for an investment bank there. So just a lot of possibilities that you can do, a lot of different forms of exploration, and really helps you in terms of determining like what your path is and what you want to do while you're studying at Dartmouth, but also outside of it.
Great, thank you. We just had a really great question come in. Thanks, Rowan, for this question. Asking about imposter syndrome. So you all are talking about these really wonderful experiences that you've had, these awesome internships and research opportunities. How do you get over this idea of imposter syndrome? And maybe someone could define what that is for folks maybe on the call that don't know it. And then also tell us a little bit about how you kind of own your place at Dartmouth. Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I can begin sharing a little more of my story. So I definitely had a lot coming into Dartmouth. And I feel like the more intersectionalities that you may have, the more you can kind of feel that way at an institution like this. And it can definitely take some time for you to feel like the admissions committee made a great choice and you're here just like any other student that you earned your place. So I'm a first generation student who's low income, son of immigrants, and went to a school where I didn't feel like I was properly prepared to really thrive at an institution such as Dartmouth. So for me, I did feel like I had imposter syndrome, and that is a syndrome where you feel like at times you don't belong in a particular space, or that you somehow earned your place there differently than any other students and you're less deserving than others. So at Dartmouth, that may seem like, oh, you're not smart enough to be an institution of this caliber, or maybe they give you this place because of a particular intersectionality that you have, as opposed to like that grit and intellectual curiosity that they saw in you, like they see in every student. So for me, I think that kind of went away my first year spring once I realized that, wow, like I am such, like I'm just doing so well here at the institution, not even academically, I wouldn't say that. I think just the adjustment period, just the transition, that I was able to do so much in such a short amount of time and have so many opportunities and build so many connections at an institution and be surrounded by such a loving community that I fostered through FISUP and also other upper class folk who just felt like they were there as a part of my family. And at times when I came back home, I would say, oh, I'm going to go back home soon, like in the summer and the fall. And I would get mistaken and called two places home at one time. So for me, I think it's definitely a transition. It's definitely something that every student kind of goes through on their own experience. And I'm sure there are some students who still haven't completely, made it through the other side. But I think that there is an opportunity for students to really explore what that means and also find some form of community with them to help solidify their place at.
Great, thanks. Anyone else have some thoughts to share there? You're wise, you've gone through it. And I think as prospective students, folks who just got admitted, there's a lot of feeling of, I don't know what I'm doing. I really want to make sure that I do this right. And I get there and I put my best foot forward. So any kind of piece of advice for students who are feeling that way right now?
Yeah, so when I got to Dartmouth, I felt very out of place. Like I felt like I wasn't supposed to be here. Like I very much thought that like the admissions had made a mistake and they just clicked the wrong box or something like that. Just because I came from a public high school that frankly just it did not prepare me for Dartmouth. It didn't have the kinds of classes that I thought students at Dartmouth were supposed to have taken in high school. It didn't have the kind of extracurriculars that I heard some of my like floor mates talk about doing in high school. So I was a little overwhelmed. And an anecdote I like to share about that is actually my freshman winter. I took this course that was meant mainly for like second, third year history students, but I just thought it was really interesting. And the final project was like a 25-page paper, which now as a senior, looking back, that doesn't seem too long to me after having written like a thesis. But as a freshman who already felt like she wasn't supposed to be at Dartmouth, having a 25-page paper and seemingly being the only person stressed out about it in a class, it was a lot. But I actually had a very wonderful undergraduate advisor who was basically like our school's version of an RA living on our floor, basically looking out for our floor safety. And she gave me the idea to check out RWIT, which is the Research Writing and Information Technology Center on campus. And it's one of our resources. And I just went and I like blurted out all these ideas I was interested in writing about, and they helped me figure out exactly a topic I wanted, resources I could use. And they walked me through that process of academic collegiate research that I had never experienced before. And my 25-page paper became closer to 30. And it was honestly a pretty positive experience overall. And it made me feel like I actually could adjust to Dartmouth. So something I want to highlight from that story is just, there are so many resources here. And I feel like sometimes people, I know I did, especially my freshman year, can feel ashamed of like taking advantage of those resources because like, why should you need them? You're a Dartmouth student, but they're here at Dartmouth for a reason. So we have a tutor clearinghouse, which is students who have taken classes who are coming back to help other students take those classes now too. We have RWIT, which I mentioned before, which is very similar, students who are trained to help other students figure out their writing. You can get help through different learning fellows, depending on the department. And there are just so many resources here for you to succeed. And professors are required to have office hours. And I want to like stress that if you come here, take advantage of those, even if you aren't struggling in the class, just to get to know your professors, because they are so cool. And believe it or not, they're going to think you're really cool too. So like as a senior looking back on it, I spent way too much of my Dartmouth time feeling like I didn't belong here. And so if I can impart any wisdom onto you, if you get into Dartmouth, it's not a mistake. It's really not. Like you're supposed to be here, and take advantage of those resources, and you'll find a community and you'll acclimate, and it's okay.
Great. Thank you both for that very wise advice. You mentioned a little bit about professors. We have a couple questions in the chat box about what are professors like on campus? Are they accessible? How do you interact with them? Do you call them by the first name? Does it depend? Maybe Jack, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I'd love to. One of the funniest professor stories that I have is in Dartmouth, you won't ever take a class more than 100 people in a building in one room, which is, it's huge. Like that's massive. It's more than I've ever taken a class with before. But it's not like these other like large institutions where you're gonna have one like intro level class with 300, 400 people. But that class, which was a chemistry class, I went in on the second day of class, I believe, and the professor went off and took attendance and called everybody by their name, first name and last name, without looking at a sheet of paper. And then that blew me away because he had seen our faces twice, like ever before. And then I went to office hours, like Savannah was talking about, each professor is required to have office hours. And, asked him how he did that, along with other questions, of course, because chemistry is difficult and I needed help in that as well. But I asked him how, and he said, well, I had my partner help me recognize all of your faces just because I wanted you all to feel like I actually cared. And that one little story there kind of just shows exactly how much the vast majority of these professors actually care about the students here at Dartmouth. It's almost every single professor who I've actually had a relationship with, who I've been to office hours with, genuinely cares about each student and how they perform in their class. And just beyond class, even like when you sit down in a professor's office, the first question they ask is never about, hey, what's your question? I have other stuff to do. It's always, hey, what'd you get up to this weekend? Are you doing well in your other classes? I've never had a bad experience with the professor, which does happen. Like that's, of course, there are definitely isolated incidents. I can't speak towards every single person's experience here at Dartmouth, of course. But in my own experience, every professor that I've had and actually taken advantage of getting to know them, they've always cared more than I ever thought they would. So yeah, like that blew me away just from coming from a place where the teachers from my high school didn't care about their students as much as these professors who see 10 times as many students in a day as those teachers did. They put in a lot more effort to understand and actually care and empathize with those students in their classes.
Great, thanks. I'm curious, Abby, is there a professor that you've had during your time at Dartmouth that really stands out to you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty interested in poetry, and I've taken, right now I'm in the intermediate creative writing poetry class, and I've had Professor Francis. She's like a pretty renowned poet, and she's taught both of my classes, like the intro and now the intermediate class. And so the first class that I took with her was actually on campus. It was my freshman fall. Which, first of all, take a poetry class your freshman fall, because that's like there's no better space for processing how you're feeling. And then also I really took advantage of there's a program called Take Your Professor to Pine, where the college will like give you vouchers basically. So first of all, you get a free meal, and then you also get to take your professor to get a free meal, and you get like, my meal at least was like an hour and a half. So it was like a one-on-one conversation with Professor Francis. And it was, yeah, honestly the best time. The food was really good. And we talk a lot about poetry, which my high school is also Title I, not like the best, and it certainly didn't have any poetry classes or like a creative writing department. So having that opportunity to talk with her and like really get some really solid advice, and also just like build that relationship. So now I'm back in class with her, and like on the first day, she was like, "Hi, Abby, like, are you in South Carolina right now?" And I was like, "Hi, Professor Francis." So that's really been a great relationship.
Great, thanks. And this kind of segues weirdly into this next question that we got. This person is saying that they have one grocery store in their town. Is Hanover similar? What's the food like? So you talked a little bit about Pine, which is, for folks who don't know, this is probably the fanciest restaurant in town. Think white tablecloths. It's very nice. What other food options are there in Hanover? I think folks that are on the call probably haven't visited Hanover, and are kind of making this decision to come to Dartmouth without ever having stepped foot in New Hampshire. So is there any kind of advice or a look behind the curtain that you can give folks about what Hanover's like, food scene or otherwise? Maybe Savannah, you're shaking your head.
Yes, I feel very passionately about food. So in terms of a grocery store in town, I personally, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone else, I think the closest thing we have in town specifically is CVS, which does have a small grocery section, which is actually pretty stocked for a drugstore. So I will give it that. That being said, there are some really fantastic restaurants in town. One I always like to talk about is Lou's, which is a diner on campus. And there's actually a tradition on campus associated with it. If for any reason you're ever pulling an all-nighter to study, which I don't personally recommend, I don't enjoy all-nighters. Oh, there is a co-op. Yes, sorry, thank you. It's a little bit more of a walk than CVS, at least for me. But the co-op is a grocery store. But if you're ever pulling an all-nighter for any reason, there's a tradition that students will go to Lou's as soon as it opens, either at 5 or 6 in the morning, depending on what time, and just get a really, really great meal of breakfast food. And the diner scene in the Upper Valley is honestly so wonderful. I was never a big diner person before I came here, but there's so many great diners to come and visit when you're here. If you can, there are several groups that will actually do diner tours in the area, and you can like wake up early on some like weekend mornings and they'll go to different ones around. My personal favorite, since the Lebanon Diner is closed, is Four Aces, which is just a couple miles away. But there's also Molly's, which is another great restaurant. Murphy's, which is, I think, Irish in general, like American, Western, European food. Jewel of India is a great restaurant, and I love it so much. I probably order delivery from there at least once a week, which is bad for my wallet, but good for my stomach. And there's also really wonderful like desserts and sweet places in downtown Hanover, just like a quick walk away. My favorite is My Brigadero, which I'm gluten-free. So My Brigadero actually is mostly gluten-free. So I can have all of the like truffles and stuff that they make there, which is wonderful. And then Umblebee's is also really great. They have great tarts and great cakes. Sorry, I'm rambling, but like I said, I'm very passionate about food. And if you don't want to go on to off campus, we do have some really great Dartmouth dining services options on campus too. In a normal year, the Hopkins Center for the Arts, the Courtyard Cafe, it's your like one-stop shop for any like grilled food, like late night cravings you may be having while you're studying. The Class of 53 Commons, which we call it FOCO, short for food court. All you can eat. They usually have a stir fry station that's always up and running, a panini press station that's always up and running. Ate there just about 2 hours ago. Great place. And then Collis with make your own pasta. And I could go on and on. But I will leave you with saying that I'm a very big coffee person, and there is a Starbucks in Hanover, and that made me feel so much better about coming here. So that is how I will conclude.
Thank you. So it doesn't seem like you're going to go hungry if you live in Hanover. I can attest to that. There are plenty of places to eat. Kind of transitioning a little bit from here, we've got a couple questions in the Q&A box about things that you wish you would have known, say this time for folks who are just admitted, deciding if they want to come to Dartmouth or another institution. Is there anything that you wish you knew about Dartmouth or about what your experience would be like before you started? Maybe we'll start with Juan. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, so prior to coming to Dartmouth, I actually knew very little of it, and that was kind of intentional after I applied and got accepted, because I'm the type of person who's like always super anal. It's like I want to know everything about everything that I'm gonna do. But I was like, you know what? For this experience of the next 4 years, I'm kind of just gonna take it as it comes and just see what this institution has to offer to me and what I can learn and take and also kind of give to it. And I wish I wouldn't known overall that it's okay to ask for help and it's okay to ask for like reinforcement in whatever way that may be, especially as a rural student, when you might see that a lot of students start throwing things around like JOB, that's just outside of Boston, or they're from different boroughs in New York, or for me personally, I'm Latinx, so students, a big group of students that come from like Florida and LA and New York, and sometimes it seems like there's less of us, which is definitely are, that come from like the South or from the other parts of the country. So I wish that I would have known that it's okay to ask for help, and whether that be emotional, mental, academic, ask for extensions too, especially during these times. I'm definitely doing that a lot more. definitely letting the imposter syndrome, kind of wash away and be like, it's okay, we're living through a really rough time. And while Dartmouth is just can be a really great experience for some, it can also be a challenging experience for some too, and provides you with a lot of opportunity for growth. But in order for you to grow, I think one of the most important things you need to do, which is reiterating my point, is to also ask for help and ask for support whenever you may need it. I think that's a really great sign of maturity, but also of just like personal growth and intellectual growth.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? What advice would you give to yourself when you were thinking about coming to Dartmouth? Maybe Jack, Abby, or Savannah?
Yeah, sure. For one, I could not agree with Juan more. Like, ask for help when you get here. I know I was not prepared that well academically for Dartmouth. I didn't ask for help for my first little while my freshman fall, and I really should have. And then I eventually did, and eventually caught back up, and it was fine. But I could not reiterate more. Ask for help. There are so many ways to get help at Dartmouth that you should take advantage of them. So going past that a little bit, another thing that I wish I would have told my freshman year self was it's definitely great to try out as many things as you possibly can, like clubs wise. Yes, go to that weird, club you've never heard of before. Go do this silly thing that you think is kind of fun. Yes, please go do all those things. But find something that you actually really enjoy and then kind of go headfirst into it. I would say I overextended myself a little bit my freshman year, and that kind of made me not be able to put my all into something that I really, loved and cared about. And it took me until my sophomore, maybe even my junior this year, to actually find that thing that I was really loved. But it was something that I joined my freshman year. But I was like, oh wait, this is actually something I really, really care about, and I want to devote time to this. So yes, absolutely, do everything you possibly can your freshman year. Find what makes you really excited and something you really care about, but then like dive headfirst into it. Keep exploring things, but definitely once you find that one thing, actually put your head down, because that was something that I wish I would have done earlier.
Great, thanks. Abby or Savannah, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, so I think I would also say, kind of building on what Jack just said, just like be open to being surprised and like interested in activities that you might have gone in just like, oh, I'll go to one meeting and then you fall in love with it. Like for me, that happened academically. Like I came in thinking I was super interested in biology, and then like thinking back to my old high school, like we had like science, math, like the very basic subjects. And now here I am at Dartmouth, and there's just like so many new departments and opportunities and classes that I'd never even like thought of taking. And so yeah, I did end up changing like my academic focus, and I think it's really been the best for me. And kind of surprised my mom when I told her, but it was definitely for the best.
Great. And we have one final question for the night. It might take us a few minutes to get around to everyone to answer, but there's a question in the chat from someone who said, what made you choose to go to Dartmouth? Do you remember what tipped you in the direction of Dartmouth over a different school? Maybe we'll start with Savannah and then go around the horn.
Yeah, so I always feel a little silly answering this question because I fully committed to Dartmouth just on a gut feeling, which is not the way that you should do it, at least for everyone. I applied to 18 schools and I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I kept waiting to feel like I was okay. And I felt that when I got into Dartmouth, and I said, I'm going to act on it. So I guess what I will say off that is just to trust your gut, and you know what's best for you, and you know what you want out of your college experience. And even if you think you don't know, I bet that secretly deep down you do. And so just follow your heart, trust your instincts, and definitely look up the resources at different places before you commit. Because if I had to choose Dartmouth again, I think I would say that I would choose Dartmouth again because of the resources here.
Great, thanks. And Jack, you're next on my screen. Would you mind telling us why you chose Dartmouth?
Absolutely. I have like one story. When I was doing my whole college admissions process, like I'm sure everybody else was, I visited 20 other schools in the Northeast, in the South, and all over this side of the country. I really loved Dartmouth. I came here. I was only here for about 12 hours when I was here, so I saw it. I got here, saw it, left pretty much. But during one of my info sessions, there's one sentence that I remember to this day that resonated with me and will never leave my mind for the rest of my time living. And it was at the very end of my first info session before my tour. The admissions officer said, "Here at Dartmouth, we strive to succeed, but not at the expense of others." And that kind of sums up what I truly think Dartmouth is about. And that was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, a long time ago now that I heard that. And after being at Dartmouth for almost 3 years, that is absolutely true. The people I've met here are some of the most kindest, smartest, most intelligent people, but these people are going to do great things, and people around me are going to do great things, but they're not going to be stepping on other people's throats to do that, if that makes any sense, and that's something that really resonated with me, and that will always resonate with me. So that's why I chose Dartmouth, that one sentence that I will always remember.
Thanks, Jack. How about you, Abby? What made you choose Dartmouth?
Yeah, so I chose Dartmouth without ever having visited, which is probably similar to a lot of you during COVID times. And the two main reasons that I chose it were, like Savannah was saying, was like affordability, and the financial aid package really was just super important to me. And along with that, like things outside of the financial aid package, like trips was covered for me, and study abroad, like the affordability of that. And then also just like the undergraduate focus of Dartmouth, I think was super important. I'm from like a place where a lot of people go to super big state schools, and talking to some people who graduated before me, that just didn't seem like the experience that I wanted. And being able to have like close connections with professors and being able to work and do research was something that was super important.
Great, thank you. And to close us out, Juan, would you mind telling us why you chose Dartmouth?
Yeah, I think just to iterate Abby and Savannah's point, one of the main reasons that I did was because of affordability. I was definitely an institution that I'd said broke a lot of like perceptions of what I thought higher education was and what was accessible to me as a student, and incoming college student, and for my family as well. So that was a huge part. But aside from that, actually, I have just a short story that I'll tell. I was actually doing dimensions. So hopefully next year a lot of other people will be able to experience this as well. And it's just a remarkable feeling, because as the Dartmouth coach was going around, I was sitting next to someone else who was deciding between Dartmouth and another institution. And I remember just like tapping her shoulder before we even got off the Dartmouth coach, and said, "This is the school for me." And much like Jack was saying, like I also visited some other institutions before coming to Dartmouth, and I didn't feel like I belonged there. That space was specifically for me. So it really is kind of like a feeling that you get sometimes. But now as a student, I would say I also did not want to be like a number at any place that I went to. My high school was small enough where the teachers knew who I were. And to me, that was something that I held so dear to me. And I also wanted that to be my experience at an institution that I went to, because much like Abby was saying, I know a lot of people that go to state schools or other forms of institutions around me, and you really are more like a number based on how they described it. So I really wanted that one-on-one connection with professors and with other students. And I got that. So if you're looking for that, and you're looking for a lot of fresh air and a lot of space to grow, I would definitely say come to Dartmouth.
Great, thanks everyone, and thank you all for being on this panel tonight. I think this was really helpful, and we put some email addresses in the chat for the students on the panel. So if you want to contact students later, you can always do that on our website through the contact student page. But there's also some email addresses in the chat if you want to continue the conversation. And I want to thank all of the participants for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. And please let us know if you have any questions about Dartmouth or about your enrollment or anything like that. We'd love to answer them. And with that, I'll wish you all a good night and hope you stay safe and healthy and have a good rest of your evening. Bye.